Yeah, we got rain coming this way. Good. Yeah, we got rain coming this way. Yeah, we got rain coming this way.
That's interesting. I guess I'm going to record this one too. I think I'm going to record this one too.
Yeah, okay.
Drive home. Because I can. Move your stool instead of this chair, so I'm higher up. I had to reinstall everything on my computer and reset everything, so I didn't have it all set up properly.
Just bought a new, actually a refurbished Focusrite, so we can add more mics in the sanctuary.
Nice.
You may find that useful for this because it gives you, I don't know, it doesn't do anything for the cameras, but the sound it gives you a unified
But like the new area, it's like very immersive. Like it was, I said, if I win the lottery, the first thing I'm doing is buying Jared a ticket to.
Well,
Star
Disney
Wars.
had to do something after MGM put in the whole Hogwarts thing. Disney had to do something after MGM put in the whole Hogwarts thing.
Yeah, they got rid of Jaws though to do that.
Yeah.
And they got rid of the Back to the Future ride. I loved that ride. It was terrible, but I loved it.
And I've read a lot of their.
I actually found the VR program that they ran on at that. So I know where to go to reenact the Back to the Future ride from Universal Studios from back then.
Oh, you just barely
How are you? How you doing, guys? I like your shoes. Thank you. And your nail polish. Thank you.
My
Okay, I decided not to just send you the whole list all at once. I'm gonna send you one
chair.
one
No, we
topic
have,
at a time.
we have a Wesley this
Yeah,
time.
is it funky?
So,
From Manhattan.
what you got?
Oh,
Manhattan,
was
like,
in Manhattan earlier today.
Oh, lovely.
So it might be
You were there?
another chair.
No.
My sister's boyfriend sent it.
Oh,
I don't know if they're gonna be here or not, but we might as well anticipate that they will.
That's like the whole message of this entire course.
And it is 6 minutes past 7, so I guess we'll go ahead and get started.
Actually,
If I can figure out how to use my PowerPoint.
The praise that you
again.
live for your husband to say that actually was
he
good.
was good. Well, actually.
I laughed, Aubrey. I just didn't give you the credit that joke deserved.
All right, so this week is What Are Friends yet again. And hopefully everything's working. I can't tell my microphone.
I know. We need somebody on Zoom to be like, yeah, we can hear you out.
Oh,
Oh, yeah. That's a good idea.
Dad,
Yeah.
Buzz is not helping me.
Okay, tell him I said he has to. And also remember the tap the shoulder.
Okay.
so just let me know which topic you want me to send the list for first, and I'll write that first.
Full
and
house
second,
tonight.
on the list.
It looks like we're on the first one.
We are just starting.
Actually, we just finished.
Okay. Well, it's good to see everybody.
This is the review.
You got caught in time loop, and
We just started all over.
Jared's trying to figure out how a computer works, so it's all right.
he just done an update on his computer, and he's had to reconfigure everything.
Yeah, that's a constant problem in there. Is Windows decides to throw in an upgrade that screws it all.
all right, so the computer is working, I guess.
Maybe.
Maybe. It doesn't show that it's picking up audio, but
Let me
it
see.
is.
Is
So,
it broadcasting on YouTube?
yeah, it should be.
Okay, let me check again and see
Broadcasting
if she's...
live from Willow Creek.
Yeah.
Same bat time, same bat channel.
Yes, it says that it is working. So, and it says so we have excellent connection,
Oh, good.
whatever that means.
Proceeds to
They
drop
always
home.
do.
Appreciating the community that's in this room.
Oh.
That's probably what it is. So,
Was that actually good? Or was it just good?
we are doing What Are Friends yet again this week, and hopefully that's good.
That's what friends are for. That's a song.
Do you remember what we've talked about so far?
Why, yes, I do.
I remember. Just in case. I totally hear what you remember.
Family note taker over there.
Go ahead, Abby.
It's the students I like having in
I
class.
was gonna say, we covered who are friends mostly in Europe.
What's that?
You covered important friends people, mostly in Europe. So far.
Yeah.
Valor-
So we covered what occurred before we formed so the Reformation and everything that went along with that. Church of England, and the main thing with them was the policies of forced tithes that Friends really didn't like. Don't like being forced to do anything because we're a bunch of
We're
rebels.
pacifists, but we're stubborn.
And we didn't like hireling priests. So, and then the other thing, major thing, was the English Civil War, which was kind of a fight between church and church, people versus the king, and who is in control. Kind of the divine right versus personal liberty, I guess. So,
Can I say something?
yeah, go ahead.
We think, a lot of Americans think about the American Civil War, where we had a definite, or fairly definite demarcation of the South and the North. That was not true in England at all. It was literally town and town and town and town could vary, which about the closest modern equivalent that would happen is during the Troubles in Northern Ireland. Literally to this day still, you can tell whether the village is mostly English or mostly Irish as you drive into it. It's still, I mean, there will be a big, if it's English, there will be a big arch over the roadway coming into town with William on his horse in the middle of it, and orange flags everywhere, and British flags everywhere. You come into a Catholic town, and there will be nothing. But it was literally, there was no this segment, it was chaos.
It's literally community versus community, brother against brother, stuff like that. So the other thing that we covered was the early leaders, and Abby kind of got involved on that. The Valiant 60 were the first group of leaders. And we talked about George Fox, who was the founder. Margaret Fell was considered the mother of Quakerdom. George Whitehead, he is a young guy. Ann Cam Aldland, who left her husband at home so she could go travel and minister because she didn't want to have pregnancy getting in the way of her ministry, which I found was funny. James Naylor, and we'll talk more about him today. Elizabeth Hooton and Mary Fisher. And Mary Fisher was the missionary. So is there any others that you might have looked up? Or did you? Why not? They're really cool.
Gotta assign us homework.
Well, I will assign that
Aubrey,
to you
look at this person, Eric that person.
later. So we also talked about the church structure that they developed towards the end of Fox's life. Monthly meetings, quarterly meetings, yearly meetings. We talked about membership and what that is and how they are, and committees and leadership. Need any clarification on any of that? I haven't gotten any applications for membership, so. So now we're going to kind of look at the transitional period, which leads into why we're in America. I was going to go over the various schisms, but I thought that it's important to cover Naylor and Fox a little more so we understand the reasoning behind a lot of the schisms. So, because it actually still affects us today. So this is the Valiant 60. That's Fox, Naylor, and Mary Fisher in front of the Sultan, which is kind of cool. And then the next round of people included Robert Barkley. He's the black and white photo. Isn't that great? He's a theologian.
Those were intense wigs, weren't they?
Don't assume that's not his real hair.
He was educated in France, so he has a very French style there. He looks like
French smile.
Louis. Whoops. And then William Penn is the other one that we'll look at, and that's a younger picture of William Penn. So
He did not appear on the Quaker Oats. It wasn't actually him.
although some of the paintings of him look very similar.
Very true.
So the Valiant 60 were nearing the end of their ministry towards the end of the 17th century. And the next generation of leaders were starting to take hold. And they faced a lot of the same challenges. They were still being persecuted, sent to jail for going to jail for not taking off their hat and not swearing oaths and stuff like that.
Not wearing shoes.
But they also had different circumstances. So what the Valiant 60 were facing were different than what the transitional period people were. And it was more going from persecution to the actual fights in court to actually change the laws. And that's what Penn was very famous for. So before we get to Penn, we have Naylor versus Fox. And this is what the Naylor Institute or whatever had to say about it. By all accounts, he, Naylor, was an extremely charismatic man and a great preacher. He attracted a loyal personal following, which troubled some other Quakers. George Fox often expressed concern that Naylor was becoming over-enthusiastic and erratic, and by 1656, they were hardly on speaking terms, although Fox visited Naylor in Exeter? Is that how you pronounce that?
Exeter.
Exeter, okay. Prison in that September. They were not reconciled and differences remained.
That wasn't a joke for a name for a prison.
So this is just 4 years after Fox saw his vision. So that's how intense the schism between the two were at that point. And then in October 1656, this is a month after he went to prison, Naylor and his friends staged a demonstration that proved disastrous. They reenacted the arrival of Christ in Jerusalem, still commemorated on Palm Sunday. Naylor rode on horseback into Bristol, attended by followers who sang "Holy, Holy, Holy," and strewed the muddy path with garments. Though Naylor denied that he was impersonating Jesus and said, rather, that Christ was in him, he refused to explain his actions, and the eccentric devotion of his followers convinced many that he had messianic pretensions.
Ecstatic.
Ecstatic? Did I? I
You said
can't
eccentric.
Well, he was eccentric too.
Either one was true.
And then this person later says, Fox was horrified, recounting in his journal that James ran out into imaginations and a company with him, and they raised up a great darkness in the nation. Quakers denounced Naylor's publicly. Their faith in that of God and everyone was seen by many of their critics and persecutors to imply equality with Christ. Though Quakers strongly denied this criticism, Naylor's ambiguous symbolism was seen as playing with fire. So,
Do we have a picture of what happened to Naylor after that?
no, he just
Other than
had
the first one we had?
he is branded with a B on his forehead, for blasphemer, and he had a red hot iron shoved through his tongue.
Yeah, he had a fun time after that.
He did tongue piercing before it was cool. So
Was that the
Or-
by Fox?
No, it
no, it
wasn't.
was by
I was gonna
the
say.
government.
No,
No,
it wasn't that.
I feel like that
We
was-
weren't that
yeah,
I didn't know Fox was
It was by the government at the behest of the Church of
Well,
England.
Quakers were branded with a Q frequently, right? Did I imagine that? Or maybe that was in a book.
I'm
that-
not even for
I'm not aware. They were hung. I wouldn't put it past
I
them.
might be thinking of,
The Harry
Scarlet Letter.
Handmaid's Tale.
that could be
Quakers are a
too.
big thing in England.
Oh, wow.
They are, because Quakers are written about quite often, so
In several
especially
books
in
from back then, it
sci-fi.
was
Like the
quite common to
religious-
beat up a couple
Yeah.
Quakers per day. Would that be
So
considered normal?
Fox didn't like Naylor necessarily, but he didn't exactly fully excommunicate him because that wasn't what we were about. They just tried to convince Naylor of his wrongdoing. His concern was that he is overenthusiastic and erratic, and that the enthusiasm and ecstatic devotion of his followers convinced many that he had messianic pretensions. So Naylor's followers were enthusiastic and disruptive in meetings for worship. They weren't very quiet, and that made other Quakers a little bit upset. And the problem is Fox himself was a bit disruptive too. So he's it's kind of like a pot calling the kettle black. So sort of
Didn't he
thing.
kick in some doors at some points to interrupt them?
Yeah, he'd stand on pews and yell at the priest, and yeah, he kicked in a couple of doors. It's Fox is an interesting character too.
Never actually fought, but he was very combative and
He fought with his words.
yes.
Yeah, and he did take a few blows too, and was left for
Yeah,
dead
he got
many
attacked a
times.
lot too.
So the main concern was the statement "that of God and all people," and you've heard me use that phrase as well. A lot of people thought Naylor was saying that he was equal to God because Christ was in him, which us today, that's not a very strange saying because evangelicals invite Christ into their hearts. So, but at the time, it's very scandalous. So, God was only in the church, so.
Those make me wonder what their thoughts on Pentecost were.
So Naylor also had his opinions about Fox. He thought that Fox was demanding allegiance. Like you couldn't be a part of the Friends Church or the Religious Society of Friends unless you bowed down to Fox. And he would have nothing of that. Fox actually did. Fox, once when they were in prison
Right.
together,
Got it.
he
That's funny.
asked Naylor to kiss his hand, and of course Naylor said that was
Just as friends.
pretty popish. So, and Fox obviously didn't really mention this scene in his journal, but
Yeah, I was gonna say that was not in the journal.
but he did.
Didn't work out like plans.
Eventually, after Naylor got out of prison in 1659, he did come to Fox and knelt before him, asking for forgiveness. So
That's in the journal.
that is in the journal because Fox won. So, but the problem with all this is my take. They're both very charismatic individuals. They both had huge followings of thousands of people. And Naylor really became a Quaker because he was involved in the Civil War and he didn't like it. So he loved their peace testimony, and that's why he got involved. And he was very vocal about it all.
We're not on YouTube at this point.
We're not. Well,
Say
that
whatever you
stinks.
want.
I was checking in with Ann, seeing if we were transmitting.
says we are still.
Well, you're probably recording, so this can be put
Yeah,
on YouTube later.
we are recording. I don't know if it's actually picking it up.
We get sound.
Both of them were prideful in their own ways as well. So Fox said that Naylor was too prideful, and that's why he was in so much trouble with the rest of the Quakers. But Fox had his own pride situations. And Naylor did take things a bit too far. I'm pretty sure he's one of them that would walk naked through town, and because we were supposed to be naked before God. So sometimes taking words literally is a bad thing.
I think a lot of people did that. A lot of people did acts like that.
Yeah.
Back in the day.
Back then it was shock value. Even
Still is
the
today, to some
streakers
extent.
at the football games and stuff like that, same concept.
Today you just be put on the sex offenders registry, so no
Yeah.
one's gonna do it. Otherwise, I'm sure people would be doing the same thing.
I
Like
feel like the consequences might have been harsher.
back then.
200, 300 years
Yeah, but
ago.
it's more shameful to be on a sex registry than it is to get whipped.
So no one's gonna reenact the song of
Yeah, just getting put in the stocks wasn't a big deal.
Yeah.
Sex offender registry is.
Yeah, that's way
So-
worse.
But Naylor, as much as he was controversial, he had a lot of good things to say. So that's why he's still respected in a lot of branches of Friends. So this is one of the first editions of his book. It's called Several Papers of Confessions, Prayers, and Praise by James Naylor. You can't see it online because that's where I screenshotted it from. It's extremely hard to read though. And we're going to read off of that page. So go ahead.
Are you able to zoom in?
Oh, there we go, thank you.
Okay, that helps.
Okay.
So this is what he had to say. There is a spirit, and this was right before he passed away. So after he confessed to Fox and all of that, he had not very much time, but he wrote this entire book and other confessions. And this is what he wrote right at the end of his life. So and he died because somebody robbed him and beat him to death, basically. So there is a spirit which I feel that delights to do no evil, nor to revenge any wrong, but delights to endure all things, and hope to enjoy its own in the end. Its hope is to outlive all wrath and contention, and to weary out all exultation and cruelty, or whatever is in a nature contrary to itself. It sees to the end of all temptations, as it bears no evil in itself, so it conceives none in thoughts to any others. If it be betrayed, it bears it, for its ground is spring, and spring is the mercies and forgiveness of God. Its crown is meekness, its life is everlasting love unfeigned. It takes its kingdom with entreaty and not with contention, and keeps it by lowliness of mind. In God alone it can rejoice, through none else. I don't even know where I am. Regard it or can own its life. It's conceived in sorrow and brought forth without any to pity it. Nor doth it murmur at grief and oppression. It never rejoiceth, but through sufferings. For with the world's joy it is murdered. I found it alone, being forsaken. I have fellowship therein with none who lived in dens and desolate places in the earth, who through death obtained this resurrection and eternal holy life.
I'm just reading it and going, that looks like the first draft of my thesis.
It makes as much sense.
That's funny.
So, this is what a lot of people cling on to as his kind of his shining light, so to speak, his wisdom. And he basically says in there that he wasn't what a lot of people thought he was.
That's eerily similar to that verse, forgive me, but that is used in a lot of weddings, like love bears all things,
Mhm.
and blah, 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 blah. Like it's,
Patient time
yeah,
without ending.
yeah, it's kind of similar to that.
So also in another place, this is from an article called Too Full of Himself by a Western Friend, which is not an Evangelical Friends yearly group. It's a different type of group, but they publish this, and the title of it is Too Full of Himself, and it's a magazine based about on temptation, and is published in 2014. He says in 1659, Naylor wrote a long confession, and you can look at that confession on the second website if you want to write that down. It's the whole thing. So he wrote, in that confession he said, I abused my power. He also said this problem had snuck up on him little by little. He said that he started listening to his own ideas a little bit more every day, and he started listening to himself more than God. He started loving his followers a little bit more every day. He started loving them more than he loved God. So part of that isn't bad, but he got to focusing on who was liking him instead of who he was following, and that's what Fox's main concern was with him. So what we can learn from this is that following Christ is hard no matter when it was. It still is. Being part of a religious society is also hard because there's people in it. Trying to live without attracting attention to yourself is hard. In fact, my grandma, when I told her that I was going to be a pastor, she said, you better not attract attention to yourself and stay focused on Christ, or I'll disown you. My grandma was very harsh in a very loving way.
Yeah.
Only Naylors in this family.
So she was very concerned about pastors becoming like Naylor. So, and submitting yourself to others in your meetings, hard. Life is hard,
And then die. Oh.
but it's worth it.
Ow.
So this brings us to.
reference on that?
So this, at the end of 1659 is when that all happened, and Naylor passed away shortly after his confessions, and this is about the same time that William Penn is becoming introduced to the Friends Church, so, or Religious Society of Friends. So he was born in 1644. So when he was my son's age, when Fox really started taking off and the Society of Friends really began. His father was an admiral in the Navy, very important admiral. His mother was a widow of a Dutch sea captain, which is kind of interesting. The Dutch and the English were at war shortly after this. So
On and off for a few hundred years, yeah.
and
Slightly less than the French, but
and she is also a daughter of a very wealthy merchant and a Dutch merchant as well. Penn's mother was related to the Oak de Graaf family, which Wikipedia says is an important Mennonite family.
Okay.
I don't know anything about that.
So they
They're
come out
just
of,
saying,
they come out of the ground,
Groffs
right?
in Lancaster. I mean, there are lots of Groffs in Lancaster.
So they come
Yes,
out
I
of the
knew
ground,
that.
right?
so they were connected, and that's part of the reason why Penn and Pennsylvania has a lot of Mennonite derivatives in it. So, and after a failed campaign in the Caribbean, the Penns were exiled to Ireland. Which is lots of fun. If you don't do well in the Caribbean, you get sent to Ireland. This was Cromwell at this time, so.
Yeah. And the Irish would send you to Connacht.
So after Cromwell's death, the Penns went back to England, where Admiral Penn received great honors from the king because of his restoration work. So Admiral Penn, even though he is an admiral in the Navy, he still followed orders of Cromwell, but he didn't like him. He was sent to Ireland to help with the various rebellions and all that the Irish people did at that time, which they had a lot. So I'm sure the Irish don't think much of Penn either, because they really don't like Cromwell.
When does this line up with St. Patrick?
Several hundred years later.
1200 years after the fact.
Okay, just wanted to know.
St. Patrick was around 400, so it's quite a
Okay.
distance. So
Background on what he's saying. In 1641, you had basically what was going on in England, going on in Ireland.
30 years before Penn was born, ish.
yeah,
And
How long after Braveheart was this?
300 years?
Yeah.
Really?
300 years in wrong country. You had the rebellions that took place, and one of the things I worked on when I was at Trinity was the depositions of the 1641 uprising. And it was the Catholics trying to take land back that had been taken from them and given to the plantationers. And the depositions are, after that had happened, everybody hoping when it was all settled out that the Crown would reimburse them for all the land, livestock, crops, whatever. And it's a whole list of things. And there were a whole bunch of reported atrocities, some of which are founded somewhat in truth, some of which are greatly exaggerated that took place. So it was just an extension of the English Civil War.
So because of Admiral Penn's status, he helped the king restore the monarchy, and the king was in his debt to like 16,000 pounds, which is like $2 million or more. It's today. It was a great deal of money. So the king held him in high esteem. So William went to school at Oxford for a while because his dad could afford it. And due to growing up during the Civil War period and living in Ireland and seeing all that was going on there, and because of his mom's connections to the Dutch community, he was open to a lot of different ideas. Which this time frame, I mean, it's basically like the 60s. And so it's there's wars going on, peace protests, there's
Less drug use?
I don't know. Witch trials seemed like they were pretty
True, those were
tripping.
natural LSD things.
But
Fermented weed and whatnot.
Yeah.
but there's a lot of similarities. So he developed sympathies toward minority groups that were persecuted. And in Oxford at the time, there was groups called the Cavaliers that would harass a bunch of different dissenting groups. William, because of his status, was part of that group, but he often spoke out against what they were doing. Didn't like the harassment. And this is also the beginning of the Enlightenment period, and Penn was greatly interested in politics, science, and economics, which were all hallmarks of the time. So with Parliament, Cromwell brought in a stronger Parliament, and this was seen as an improvement over the divine right of the king. And science was becoming a dominant method of research after Newton's discoveries and all of that. And economics came in with the English philosopher John Locke and his 2 treatises of government. And John Locke inspired English Enlightenment thinkers and classic liberalism, which is what inspired the Declaration of Independence. So, and he was fined by the school because he was supporting a fired professor. And he later was expelled from Oxford because he didn't want to go to church. Which is kind of funny. Don't let your kids do that. So after being expelled at 18, his mother convinced his father to send him to France to go to school in Paris. And he also saw various religious expressions there. He is very intrigued by Notre Dame, but he also didn't like it because he thought it was too showy. So even this was before he became Quaker, but he still thought it was showy. And this is coming from a man that the Quakers said didn't dress very plain. So he was always getting hounded for not dressing very plainly. But he is greatly impressed with how the Quakers acted during the Great Plague of 1665. And even though they were being actively persecuted, they openly tried to help people. And it often caused greater trouble for themselves because people that they helped would later tell on them, and they were sent to jail. And it often caused greater spread of the disease because the prisons were very unsanitary. And then he was arrested for attending a Quaker meeting when he was 22. He didn't openly confess that he was a Quaker until he got arrested, which is why he could still go to school at Oxford. After he was arrested, Admiral Penn disinherited William, and William became homeless, which is kind of interesting. He lived in luxury basically his entire life, and then he became homeless.
Just a side note here. I went to Trinity until the late 70s. The only people that could attend Trinity were people who were Church of Ireland. Quakers couldn't attend, Catholics couldn't attend without having specific permission. If you were Catholic, you had to get a letter from your bishop that said you could attend Trinity. If you were Quaker or one of the other dissenting sects, you had to have a letter from your leadership or whatever that said it was okay with them that you attended Trinity. They did away with that in the mid-70s. So that was fairly standard in all the universities in Great Britain. in Northern Ireland. It isn't true anymore. They phased it out about the time we were having the big civil rights movements. Jews were still not accepted in England in some universities and some of the colleges at Oxford until the 80s, the 90s.
Which is why Chariots of Fire is a pretty big deal. So the movie, because it was a Jewish man and the guy that wouldn't run on Sunday. So there's two big political deals going on in one movie. So when he became homeless, the Quakers let him stay with them. So he traveled throughout England, Ireland, and Germany with the Quakers, staying in their homes and traveling with them. And he got to be known as the Quaker Defender, because right before he was arrested, he was actually in school. He got accepted back into Oxford and was studying law. So hence the transition from being the persecuted to the tolerance acts and stuff like that. And he wrote his first pamphlet in 1668, 2 years after his first arrest. And he wrote another the same year, and the second pamphlet got him arrested again. First one was called Truth Exalted, the Princes, Priests, and People, which is basically a hit piece telling the various ills of all the various Christian traditions. Wasn't very well received by the Church of England and the Catholics and the Puritans, but the Quakers really liked it. And the second one that got him arrested was the Sandy Foundation Shaken. They wanted him to detract everything that he said, and he instead wrote another one that this one got him arrested for blasphemy. And they said that he is denying the Trinity, although all the arguments written against his work often confirmed that Penn fully promoted Trinitarian theology, and it was very similar to what would eventually be called Trinitarian incarnational theology, which was promoted by Barth and Bonhoeffer and more recently the Torrance brothers in the Presbyterian Church, but Quakers wrote about it back then. So while he is in prison for that pamphlet, he was given writing materials and commanded to write a retraction.
I'm guessing that didn't go the way they planned.
I don't know why they would give pen and paper to somebody that was in prison for writing.
Let's just give some mints and some ink and some specially made paper to a guy who was in prison for forgeries. Great, good idea.
Yeah.
I know.
So instead of writing a retraction, he wrote a treatise entitled No Cross, No Crown, a discourse shewing the nature and discipline of the Holy Cross of Christ and the denial of self. A daily hearing of Christ's cross is the alone way and rest and kingdom, alone way to rest and kingdom of God. Sounds like a page turner. I don't think we're called Publishers of Truth anymore because our titles are too long. So I didn't get it out, but I do have No Cross, No Crown. It is the only Quaker book that I ever bought at a contemporary Christian bookstore.
Huh.
They just don't have them, or?
They don't sell Quaker stuff, but this one was actually there. It's a very important book. You pass it around. It's great. So this is one of the quotes No pain, no palm, no thorn, no throne, no gall, no glory, no cross, no crown.
Sounds like something we'd have on a bumper sticker.
Very much so. True religion does not draw men out of the world, but enables them to live better in it, and excites their endeavors to mend it. Very controversial stuff, huh?
This is good t-shirt stuff.
It really is.
Well, I wonder too, the separateness was such a big thing for Mennonites at that time, and he is connected to that somehow.
Yeah, they are.
He's
But
saying,
he
nah.
flips it over and
Right.
says, no, we need to connect more with the world.
We need to be involved and make it better.
Yeah.
Are you going to Michael Jackson or the Beatles route?
Yes.
Okay. Just wanted to clear.
So he spent 8 months in the Tower of London for these pamphlets and writing that book. And immediately after he was released, he was arrested again because he violated the Conventional Act, where no more than 5 people in addition to family members could assemble for any religious purpose, not according to the Church of England.
1 of 5.
Immediately after he was released, he goes and he does that. And that was in 1670. And it was the Penn Mead case is what was being argued. And the jury found him not guilty. So all of the jurors were arrested and put in jail with Penn until
sounds
they
illegal.
could come up with a guilty verdict.
That
And they
sounds like
weren't
it's
given any food or drink the entire time that they were in there. So it was a very, very big case. So eventually they allowed the trial to happen again. They actually didn't allow Penn to provide a defense either. They were told that you're going to give a guilty verdict, period. The resulting case, after they found him not guilty a second time, and they took Penn back to jail, he yelled out to the people, "You're Englishmen, stay that way." So the jurors were all fined, and a guy by the name Bushell refused to pay the fine because he was pretty inspired by Penn. And the Bushell case actually shaped a legal precedent in regard to jury treatment.
Really good in prison, based on the verdict.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How dare you find into
It's
someone
actually
innocent?
it's a very compelling case.
I
It's
guess.
really interesting.
I guess that's an important
Yeah. That'd be an important piece in any kind of legal setting. If
Things-
you go
things
into
up for
as
granted
juror
around
and
here.
you say, if you don't find them guilty, you're going to jail.
Yeah. So,
Well, crap.
like I said, the jury again found Penn not guilty, and he was released after he went back to jail for a little while, and they issued him a fine for contempt of court, which is in the news now as well.
They didn't have any gag orders on it, did they?
Oh yeah, they had lots of gag orders on him.
Okay, just
So.
ask.
And following the trial, Admiral Penn wanted to talk with William again, and he gained respect for his son because his son had a lot of he had a strong spine, I guess. He wasn't spineless like he thought he was, being in a church of pacifists. So he had respect for his son and his pursuit for justice. So contrary to William's pleas, he went ahead and he paid the fine for him. And that act actually got a lot of attention from the king. He thought it was very impressive that this guy that completely opposed everything his son stood for went ahead and paid for the fine because he respected his son's pursuit of justice. and it was a good thing. And Admiral Penn also made an appeal to the Duke, who was next in line to the King, and requested to make William a royal counselor. I don't really know what that means, but basically it meant that the King wouldn't take Penn's land, even
Good
if
to
he
know.
was arrested again, which he was.
Yeah.
So-
Not just in England
I'm
either.
trying to remember
That's just
Thanks.
that could have roots, could be in the roots of what's now known as the King or Queen's Council,
Yeah.
which is like the attorneys in the U.S. that are allowed to plead in front of the Supreme Court. It's the ones that are allowed to plead cases. It's like between being a judge
Columbia
and
University just got shut down.
just being a solicitor.
Okay.
So it might have had some type of connection like
NYPD
that. That's
and children.
a guess on my part. I'd have to do
For
some
Kansas.
research.
Probably right. But the persecutions continued, and Penn, because of his position with the King and others, were able to purchase land in West Jersey, and 200 settlers moved to America. And that got the attention of Fox, because Fox was still alive at this point. I don't know how he lived as long as he did, as much as he spent time in jail and getting beat up and all that. But Fox traveled to encourage the new settlers and to see if more land should be purchased, and they later purchased East Jersey, and Robert Barkley became the governor of East Jersey, or West Jersey, one of the Jerseys. And Barkley was also educated in France with Penn, so you see how all that works. But Barkley was Scottish, so he mainly focused on letting Scottish people settle in Jersey instead of Quakers, and they didn't change any of the laws to make it easier on Quakers, so Penn decided that it was time to go back to the King to try to get a colony where more Quaker tolerance could be expected. And the King gave him the largest private non-royal charter for any colony in the world at that time. And the land was called Pennsylvania in honor of Admiral Penn, and the cost to William was 1/5 of the land's gold and silver, and absolving the king of all remaining debts owed to Admiral Penn. So there isn't a lot of gold and silver in Pennsylvania.
What about coal?
There's a lot of coal. So basically is a tax write-off. But the king wasn't taxed, so he just wrote off his debt and gave him a bunch of land.
Which, interestingly enough, was almost all of West Jersey, West New Jersey.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
The original colonies all had an indefinite border to the west. It's as much as they can grab.
And then New Jersey's like, yeah.
So New Jersey actually went most of Maryland and a big chunk of Pennsylvania, they claimed.
So Penn then started his holy experiment. He wanted a place where power was derived from the people through open discourse. And as sovereign over the land, Penn willingly limited his own power. And the government would have 2 houses to protect the rights of private property and free enterprise to all people in the land. And there is only 2 capital crimes where you could have the death penalty, and that was for treason of the king because the king demanded it, and murder. as basically the only way that the king would allow for the charter to be accepted. All trials would be before juries
That wouldn't go to jail.
that wouldn't go to jail for finding people not guilty. And prisons would correct through workshops instead of inhumane confinement that promoted illness. It's the prisons before, they wanted your stay to be as terrible as possible.
So where did this go?
Where did it
What
go?
was the end? Was it Declaration of
Philadelphia.
Independence? Was it, right, was it Philadelphia?
How it is today, Philadelphia.
I
Well,
was gonna say, it's like,
If you think about it, a lot of this is the Constitution.
big chunks of it. I mean, we have, what, Nebraska? And maybe one or two other states that have a unicameral legislature.
One
Every-
house.
Huh?
Just one house.
Yeah. Everybody else has two. The jury thing was how it was supposed to be in England, but it never really made it to that. There was too much influence. First of all, to be appointed to a jury, more or less you had to be in the landed end of the thing, which eliminated 50, 60, 70% of the population
right.
from being on a jury. Most trials in that period that were smaller trials were just administered by a judge.
So the framework of government was created with the assistance of Thomas Rudyard, whatever, I
Rudyard,
can't
I
pronounce
think.
words.
Um,
He was a Quaker lawyer, which is interesting as well. And he was the lawyer that defended Penn in the Penn-Mead case, even though they weren't allowed to present a defense. And the framework, the most important part of it was the only charter that allowed for amendments, which is kind of interesting. The people could amend it, not just the sovereign.
That's,
So clearly I like Penn, but he wasn't always the smartest man. He actually lost ownership of Pennsylvania to Philip Ford, who was also a Quaker. Philip realized that Penn had a habit of signing papers without reading them.
that could easily backfire.
Ford embezzled most of Penn's financial holdings in this manner and began to charge Penn rent for Pennsylvania. He owned it, so he could. And Penn was a bit embarrassed about all of that, and in order to keep everything quiet and to cover his debt, he transferred all the income from his Irish estate to Ford to maintain his administrative rights over the colony. Quakers aren't perfect.
Either one in that one.
We can often be jerks like everyone else.
I get to hear of.
Is there like rationale for why Rudyard did that, or was he just greedy?
It wasn't
mature?
Rudyard.
He was just
Because Ford did
yes,
that.
Ford. He just
Yeah. Sorry.
took advantage of a situation that was presented to him. He made off pretty good. So,
Did a descendant of his eventually start a car company?
from the sounds of it, it probably could be. When Ford died, his wife threatened to sell Pennsylvania unless William paid for his back rents. The Ford family was eventually denied rights to Pennsylvania, but Penn was still required to pay the back debts. And since he was broke, he ended up in debtor's prison. And a group of Quakers arranged for the payment of his debts. And he could have sold Pennsylvania, but he would only sell it back to the king if the king would maintain the framework of government to protect the minority voice. That's the only way he would sell it. So he didn't sell Pennsylvania, and he died penniless because he wanted to protect the framework that he created.
Did he have a wife?
Yeah, he did. I don't remember
Not
her
very
name.
long.
No, he had several kids as well.
Oh, you're gonna say
He had
several
2 wives,
wives.
actually. One died and he
Oh,
remarried.
sorry.
William Jr. was part of the problem because he was a gambler and had a lot of gambling debt as well. So that's why he couldn't pay the rent for Pennsylvania, was because his son wasted all of his money. So why do I mention all of this? The charismatic leadership of the Valiant 60 attracted a lot of people to the Religious Society of Friends because they were loud, outspoken, boisterous. They didn't do things the way that the regular church did. But the way that they did things caused harsh persecution and hardship for everyone. And the hardship inspired compassion and ministry work with the other friends. We talked about that, the meetings for the suffering, which became the monthly meetings. And the compassion of everything inspired the more educated people to come into the Friends Society and to begin questioning the cultural norms. And all of that promoted positive change in both England and America. So the prison system is no longer made to be as inhospitable as possible. It's actually a crime against humanity now. And most of what we see, what we take for our rights, were fought for by a lot of the people like Penn. And that's my opinion, of course. So how Fox dealt with the challenges with Naylor, although he may have been right in what he said, and he probably was right because Naylor actually agreed with him in the end, that he was taking advantage of his position. Fox was still wrong because that legacy promoted future struggles. And Fox and Penn also faced challenges because in the followers of Fox and the followers of Penn, because Penn was educated and approached Quakerism in a more educated way, and a lot of Fox followers just wanted it to be kind of free, a free-for-all type of thing. But Fox and Penn learned from the challenges with Naylor, and they were able to work through things a lot better. And they put the movement in front of the individuals more than Naylor and Fox did. And Penn's life and work was inspiring, still inspiring, yet he died virtually penniless. So Pennsylvania was actually Philadelphia was designed by Penn. So in Philadelphia they have a lot of respect for him. But and Penn promoted the Continental Congress. That was his idea, and he really pushed it. It didn't work until near to the Revolutionary War after Penn died, but he really tried to get the colonies to work together, and the Continental Congress met in Philadelphia. So you got these three guys
Just James Naylor. Did someone like make him look like Jesus on purpose?
That's,
Or they
Every
really-
painting that he has looks.
that's what he
like
looked
that.
like.
He just waited for people to say.
Yeah.
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 I'm like, what? No. Really?
It looks like an icon to me.
I know.
Yeah.
It looks exactly like a
He
Jesus
put his hair that
icon.
way on purpose.
He,
Yeah.
yeah.
In the picture, the bee that's branded to his head's there.
Yeah.
It's you can see it if you look
can't see his
close,
tongue,
but it's
though.
not like huge.
Can't see his tongue. though.
So we have basically three different
You can see through it.
expressions of Quakerism in those three pictures. You have Fox, he's this mystical and charismatic person, but he is very much not focused on individuals and what they can do, but the movement as a whole. You have Naylor he would fit into a lot of Pentecostal churches today. And he is very performance driven. So very much signs and wonders and all of that sort of expression of faith. And then you have the scholar in Penn. So you have all those expressions in evangelicalism today as well. And we still struggle with how to reconcile between all three of those ideas. You know, just coming to terms with the group, the people that are very excitable and want to get involved in everything and performance driven, not necessarily that they're performing, but show a bunch of stuff. And then the people that like books. I obviously am very Penn driven. So I'm not very charismatic, but I do like researching things. So, and really the three main branches of the Quaker denomination kind of follow with them too. The General Conference is more like Naylor than, even though they aren't charismatic, they follow his teachings a lot more. The Evangelical Church is more like Fox, and Friends United Meeting is more like Penn.
Say the second one again. Say the second one.
Evangelical Friends are more like Fox. Just the Bible. Don't go much deeper than that. Where Penn studies more. So it goes back to no pain, no palm, no thorns, no throne, no gall, no glory, no cross, no crown. It's quoted an awful lot. People
That's
don't
not
even
glory.
know where it comes from.
Well, no, when they said that they were quoting a Quaker.
Which is why that's the only Quaker book that I ever found in a contemporary Christian bookstore. So what Penn is promoting is we can't have social, political, economic, spiritual improvements unless we're willing to die to our self-interest and promote good to all people. He's saying to be an imitator of God, of Jesus in all that we do. And his legacy is still with us. He tried to unite the colonies for a common good. He attempted to deal with the native populations humanely, and while he was in charge of Pennsylvania, they didn't have any major battles with the natives and the colonists in Pennsylvania, except in the areas that didn't adhere to the two-house rulings, which is Delaware. And the only other struggle that he had was he didn't take time to mark where his border lines were, so that's why Maryland's where it's at too. So
You really should have read his paperwork.
he really should have done his paperwork a lot better. So do we have any questions or anything?
Where's Miller?
Yeah, why'd you leave out?
He died.
Oh, those two are still alive then?
Yeah, they're
We
still
didn't mention
alive.
that.
You-
George
Penn-
Fox actually comes by here.
William Penn's on top of the Capitol building in Philadelphia, and he brings, he brought the
My mom was
Eagles
saying
and
this-
the Flyers good luck when they go into championship games.
How many
Apparently something
sacrifices
happened.
did they
2 years
have?
ago.
What's that?
How many
Apparently while we were
sacrifices
in,
did they have
in
to
here,
leave?
there something happened.
I don't
at
know. I think
Columbia University
they
today.
didn't leave enough
While
when
we
the
were
He doesn't
Chiefs
really
played
count, so it's
the
not big
Eagles.
Police were involved.
So
He signs off on it.
Yeah, he wasn't checking to see who left it.
While we were here, apparently
You guys
police
did
were
well.
called into Columbia University and people were ordered to shelter in place on campus
I'm not surprised.
from Hamas area.
Yeah. So
Sorry, just
Yeah.
was getting updates throughout the meeting there.
I didn't get to all the schisms, which is what I intended on doing,
That's what I
but
wondered about.
I thought we needed to understand why we got to where we were and how they worked that out before we get to the schisms. So,
Because that's
and
a-
a lot of the first schism deals with the people that first settled in the Jersey colonies instead of Pennsylvania. Yep.
So, what are the names of the 3 conferences again that are?
Friends General Conference,
Mhm. And then the Evangelical Conference.
Evangelical Friends Church
Uh-huh.
International, and Friends United Meeting.
Right. Okay.
Friends United Meeting was the first attempt at making the Friends Church universal.
And you're comparing them to these different guys, saying that like these ones are more charismatic, these ones are more intellectual, these ones are more evangelical. I was just curious, like, so I get the evangelical one. We send people on missions. I assume that's what you mean.
Well, more what we would consider traditional evangelical. More traditional. Even though none of them would be considered evangelical today. They would all be considered charismatic and liberal. So,
Well, I'm just wondering, like, what's distinct about the other ones? Like, I mean, you said these words. I'm just wondering, like, what's charismatic about these ones? Why do you say the other ones are more intellectual, theological, or whatever?
with Naylor, he is very focused on the emotions and feelings, and
I mean, about the church group.
the church group.
Yeah, like what's
The modern
Modern
conferences?
concept of it is
Well, you're comparing them to like
Right.
describe what they're like. But I was just wondering if you could describe a little bit more.
Well,
Just a little bit more.
in most
detail,
charismatic
points.
churches, they focus on the experience more than the theological background.
I mean, are the specific
Well,
church.
give you an example.
I was raised in a charismatic church, so I know what it's like.
Yeah.
But I just mean this. You're saying these particular Quakers, they're like Naylor. They're like the charismatics. I was just wondering, like, what is it like in there? Like, what makes it different? Like, do they have a longer quiet time? Do more people speak? Is that what you mean by charismatic?
And when I say that in a friend sense, it's very different than what most people would think in the modern evangelical churches. I said Friends General Conference is more like Naylor, more charismatic and that sort of thing. They are not what you would consider charismatic in today's church, even though they were very much focused on the emotions and feelings and things like that. They actually follow Penn a lot more in the social justice side of things than Naylor, but they identify more theologically with Naylor's positions. He is very much Christ in me and that of God in me. The way that he taught it was that you could become like God and that's why he got in a lot of trouble, because they thought that he was teaching that equality with God could be something that you could achieve. So very humanistic in thought process. So
Humanistic? You mean like by your own efforts?
Yeah.
Is that that's what you're saying?
yeah, like we can achieve.
Interestingly, that got incorporated into the works of Smith.
Yeah.
The works of Smith?
Joseph,
Joseph
the
Smith.
founding of the Mormon Church.
My first thought was Smith Wigglesworth, because I like that
There's
guy.
a lot of directions.
Okay.
Took a
Um,
hard left.
So, no, I mean, if you look at Joseph Smith and what he did, he was grabbing chunks of various religion movements all over
Right.
mid-Atlantic and northeast part, even central New York. And chunks of those, including this, got grabbed in by him and incorporated. You know, it was, so none of this exists in isolation. Some of the schisms we're going to talk about was groups from one general thought and groups from another that were overflowing each other, and there was battles between, is this meeting going to stay the way it is, or is it going to let the people coming in change it to something else? And that's always been going on in the
Yeah.
Quaker Church. It's still going on.
Oh,
in the
sure.
Quaker Church.
Well, just to bring it back to the other one, you said that they were more intellectual, theological, like Penn. I was just curious about that one as well.
Friends United meeting, it was the first attempt at making the universal denomination. And that was, they started forming right after the American Civil War, because a lot of people started converting to Quakerism because of the peace testimony. And they thought it would be better to have a more universal discipline to teach people coming in, so that people in New York and people in Kansas, people in Oregon would have a similar teaching. They founded most of the Quaker schools. Penn founded 2 Quaker schools in Philadelphia as well, but a lot of the ones farther west were all started by Friends United meeting, including Friends University. When Friends United meeting had their first actual 5-year meeting, is what they were originally called, the president of Friends University was the first clerk. So very much scholarly driven leadership, where the evangelical side of the 5-year meeting, which eventually pulled out in the 50s, completely in the 50s, they were not necessarily anti-education, but more anti-education than Friends United meeting, because with education came the criticism of Scripture, which isn't criticizing Scripture, it's being
Reinterpreted.
it's where did this come from? And is all of it real, and that sort of thing. So they look at the manuscripts and see, well, this is missing in this part. Like on Sunday, you guys weren't here, but on Sunday I said the verse 37 and what we were
here, Jared.
what we're verse 37 and what we read on Sunday wasn't in the English Standard Version.
Oh, yeah.
That's biblical criticism.
Yeah.
And they removed it from Scripture because the majority of the manuscripts that we found didn't include that verse. So they're like, this is obviously something that was added. So they were testing everything to make sure they were trying to present an honest thing instead of traditions. And along with that came more liberal theology, which the evangelicals didn't like. And along with the larger scheme of all that was fundamentalism in American church, civil rights movement and all of that, the Scopes monkey trial, evolution was becoming more big, so all of that was coming together at the same time. And that's what a lot of the evangelical churches were trying to get away from science and scholarly stuff, taking away true faiths and watering it down. We want to keep the Bible sort of thing. So
scholarship means education, study of scripture, preservation of history,
and how does this apply today? So Penn was very much in reading scripture and how does that apply to how we govern people? How do we treat people around us and that sort of thing?
Is it a living document or
And
something we made out?
and does it apply today, or is this just the ramblings of ancient people that didn't know that gravity existed?
Yeah.
So, which Newton figured out, which is what drove the Enlightenment. So, but it is, it's still very real today.
Yeah.
A lot of the arguments that they had in the 30s and the 40s in the church are still arguments that we have in elders meetings last year.
Yeah.
So the scholarly versus, it's not that our pastors aren't educated, most of them are, and most of them have PhDs.
Right.
They're educated, but there's certain aspects that they will not question. So,
Yeah.
and I don't know if that
The whole interpersonal stuff never went away.
Yeah.
Yearly meetings periodically go through this. You get a superintendent who tries to enforce their opinions of things on the yearly meeting, and they'll get away with it for a while, and then pretty soon the yearly meeting stands up and says, "No, I don't think so." And that is how all of our sort of schisms that he's talking about winds up happening.
I was just wondering
In
if there was
some
like big
cases,
differences.
they say, take,
Sounds like they're all
take my
arms.
toys and leave.
I mean, I think when we get into it,
Feels like
next,
they're all
I mean,
the same.
theosis. I mean, I'm pretty sure we all believe like Christ is in us. And we're like, as Christ is in the world. So I mean, we all kind of believe that. And maybe some people believe it a little extra than others, but more or less we're all the same.
But you
Right,
can go
sounds
to
You would be
unprogrammed
surprised.
meetings that Christ is not the center of that.
Well, that's
meeting.
completely different. That's like, there's no
Yeah,
longer-
they've
there's
actually
no longer
made a music
Christian.
video about how they're a Quaker but not a Christian.
Yes.
Yeah.
I still remember the first time I heard that one. There's a song
It's an actual song.
called "I'm Not a Christian, I'm a Quaker," which has all kinds of interesting connotations in it.
So next week we'll read
Those
chapter
people
3
also do.
of the book. And chapter 3 is 1,000 Clamoring Voices, Finding Silence in the Noise of Living.
Sad thing is that particular room has some pretty good music videos.
You watched that, Tracy?
They do a version of Taylor Swift's "Shake It Off," only it's Quaker off.
Oh, whoa! Wait,
And instead of "What does the fox say," it's "What does George Fox say?"
that does sound good.
Quoted that many times.
Yeah.
All right, we'll see
Thanks,
you all
guys.
later.
Thank you.
And they also have an entire special just on Neighbor. So, also related, I still haven't sent you anything. Which subject would you like to